canta una canzone d'amore di passione. Nella piazza del campo ci nasce la verbena, viva la nostra sera, viva la nostra sera, nella piazza del campo ci nasce la verbena.
Well, I guess I made it back after all. We had an interview with meme analysis and a live chat in 2020 so far, so I haven't been too active. I've been working on my kitchen if you guys follow me over at IG, and that took a while. It took a lot longer than I expected. It was a nice challenge to see if I could really succeed at the DIY experiment. And it was a nice time off too for me too, so I was like, I'm partially celebrating that. So let's enjoy a beer. Not a Corona, by the way. What you just heard in the beginning, or maybe I'll do it right now, was, probably put the details in the video there, but is the immensely, deeply, instinctually pleasurable experience of listening people sing in harmony, which itself is a metaphor for acting in cooperation. And with all major disasters and events, all the greatest experiences as a culture, I'd say, is us coming together in cooperation, in unison, in harmony, in sync. We might have great individuals that can pull civilization by their achievements, by their inventions, their philosophies, their actions into progress, or they can pull it down as well. But it's in celebrating collectively the leaps of progress that we bonding over the tragedies and triumphs of us as a species, I think, is one of the most powerful experiences we can have and partake in. So in light of the current COVID-19 situation, I don't want to date this episode too much, but it really made me think of what it means to feel like you're a part of something bigger, because all of our individual actions, they add up to our character. That famous phrase, is it Emerson, I think, said the thought, sowing a thought reaps a action, sowing an action reaps a habit, sowing a habit reaps a character, and sowing a character reaps a destiny. I thought that was it's a beautiful train of thought. I might have had the details wrong, but it's reiterated, our individual actions are powerful, and I'm a huge proponent of individualism and the individual over the collective, but a collective is nothing but a group of individuals. And the weight, the scale, the emergent properties of groups are very, intrinsically related to the character and the merits and achievements and collective psyche, breaking this, psychoanalytic train of thought. A collective, a civilization, societies, nations, they're all indicative of the group dream, the unified view and paradigm of reality. Like, what is our goal? What do we all define collectively as good and bad? it's a beautiful thing what can happen when a civilization works in unison. And you know, wars, epidemics, plagues, many tragedies are the thrust of progress. But you know, when we come up against a tragedy and we have to work collectively, 9/11, whatever it might be, World War II, any of the great wars, it's droughts and plagues, it gives us insight into what we're capable of, you know, what we're actually, the collective can come together and accomplish, especially when all our goals are arranged in order. And the meaning that you get from cooperating and belonging as part of a group reminded me a lot of Will Durant's Our Oriental Heritage. In the very end of it, I haven't read this. I'm such a one of those pretentious idiots that just has a bunch of books that few of which I've actually read, but I have listened to this book. Grover Gardner, or Alex Alexander, he goes by two names, is a brilliant narrator, and he really captures the wit and you know, scholarship of Will and Ariel Durant. I think this one was Will Durant by himself. He wrote this in the 1930s. It's a gloss on... He has an 11-volume series, which are hiding behind my old books up there. On this, it's called The Story of Civilization, and he means the West, because he was an American, and he wanted to give a synthetic overview, meaning a synthesis of art, politics, religion, history, science, technology, you know, all the facets, you know, the economy, finance. That in serious scholarship is very delineated into, you know, segregated into very specific subgenres, and you, it's good and bad, because you get a more accurate, you get a more detailed portrayal when you focus on just one thing like art, you know, history, science, whatnot, but you also lose the sense of the whole. And that's what I love about Will Durant. He was a genius in his own right, and he was able to use the thousands of books he's read. He took on the gargantuan task of trying to synthesize history, and what I'm getting at is it's his thesis of the first volume. This is volume 1 of A Story of Civilization. Unfortunately, it's a little, I think it got wet actually. This is Our Oriental Heritage. Just a cool 1,000-page book. It glosses through, well, here the subtitle is Being a History of Civilization in Egypt and the Near East to the Death of Alexander, and in India, China, and Japan from the beginning to our own day, with an introduction on the nature and foundations of civilization. 1935. He makes a point that one of the many he makes is that Greece is like this nexus point, you know, Greece and Turkey, the East Mediterranean, Judea, the Jewish, Egyptian, Syrian, Babylonian, you know, all Mesopotamia are like this nexus between the Far East, China going back thousands of years, maybe being one of the earliest civilizations with writing and high culture in antiquity, and then the West having the Celts, the Gaelic, Germanic tribes, you know, prehistoric tribes. St. Patty's Day is coming up. I wanted to do a St. Patrick's Day one too as well. I just finished this awesome book that was actually a gift to me last year. I took a while to read it, but this is how it links, and it's the its general thesis, the unique and very significant contribution of Ireland and the Irish culture to the continuity in the religious ideas and the philosophy generated by the Roman Christian civilization, you know, that came out of Italy and was destroyed in 476 when Alaric, is it Alaric? When Rome was sacked and had its last Roman emperor and descended into chaos. Rome was sacked multiple times in the early 5th century. Whatever way you want to view it, Rome was lost a lot of its culture. It lost a lot of its literature, religious traditions, specifically the Christian, Orthodox, Roman Catholic, you know, seed that had grown in Italy and Rome in the first few hundred years after Christ. In Ireland was, you know, and particularly Patrick and Columcille, one of Patrick's successors, was huge in preserving a lot of literature and therefore philosophy and learning from the chaos that developed after the official sack of Rome in 476. And so Will Durant makes a really thorough case, 1,000 pages deep, about the huge contribution to civilization and culture, art, learning, philosophy, that the Orient, which, like the West used to be called Occidental culture, Orient was Oriental. You had West and East was Occidental and Oriental, respectively. I guess maybe those are becoming antiquated or maybe politically incorrect. I don't know. But the whole title of the book is Our Oriental Heritage. And it's a fascinating journey. It opened my eyes, and I think that's why I'm focused so much on getting this video about the 19th century Japanese artist who painted the Great Wave, the wave off Kanagawa, Hokusai. What's his first name? Katsushika Hokusai? Because I know so little about our Oriental heritage, whether it's the Middle East, the Near East, India, the East, Asia, Japan. It has such a rich history, and it's so fascinating. And to me, the whole book itself, the reason I'm going on and on, I'm going to read the very end. It's like a 3-page synopsis. It's like what I get out of what I got from writing this book type of short essay that he tacked on to the end of this gargantuan work, which, mind you, is just the first in his 11-volume series. It gave me so much meaning to it instilled a hunger to learn more about history, and at the root of which is the meaningful connection of all our different cultures around the world, our relation as a species and not just an individual ethnicity. And Will Durant was brilliant at combing through the literature and histories and all the other knowledge of all cultures, and in this book particularly Eastern cultures, and gleaning out of that all the important concepts and you know, the most amazing contributions to just general culture and art and what it means to be a civilization. So it connects us, in other words, and I love the idea of looking at us as a species. You know, Carl Sagan was I got it up there, can you guys see? I got Cosmos right there. He is a great modern figure, proponent of viewing the earth as this oasis, you know, this immensely improbable oasis. And so anyways, all that's just to say that, you know, these huge threats, global threats, are certainly bringing us together in a very meaningful way, and are opening our eyes to what it means to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And, having a family, which is something I'd like to do very soon, start to do, is a small hint of what it's like to be a part of something bigger. And I love this Elon Musk tweet. He is such a, hopeful, optimistic, real. He's very realistic. He's not foolishly, he's not quixotic. He's not overly idealistic. He's just a realist and recognizes that we have to come together. We have to look forward. We have to plan accordingly. But we have a chance at having a bright Star Trek Next Generation, or Star Trek in general, I guess, a future, a bright, cooperative future where we all challenge ourselves to the extreme, but we all inhibit judgment. We suspend assumptions, as the great physicist David Bohm, in his book on dialogue, often was a huge proponent of. You suspend your trivial, superficial, emotionally charged assumptions about other people's entire characters based on an appearance or a soundbite that you might have heard from them. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot of restraint, because we simply don't have time. We don't have the brain capacity to sit and analyze everything to make a more accurate judgment. So we go through life using these quick judgments, rules of thumb on people's character, and it's useful, but I think sometimes it helps to reconsider ourselves as a part of a whole, as part of a species, especially in light of the internet age that we're in right now. We live in this transformational time, this light-speed communication, a deluge of information we're constantly bombarded with. And it's up to us to really look back and consider what it is we've emerged out of, what we can do with the knowledge of all these ancient civilizations that have contributed to our existence now, that are our ancestors, we're the descendants of. So anyways, I wanted to have something a little more well planned, but I'm so fascinated by the hope that comes out of the perspective of ourselves as a part of a huge project that doesn't end where our skin stops, where our family stops even. Ourselves as beings that have, billions of years of instinctual urges. The Greeks famously, they viewed gods in a very practical way. Gods are, or maybe Carl Jung said this, that Greek gods are the personifications of our natural biological instincts. We Venus and Aphrodite in love, and Mars in war, and Apollo in intellect and reason, rational, and Nietzsche's famous Dionysus, the god of wine and drunken and ecstasy. And it's the revelatory, the bliss, the euphoria that you can get from losing yourself in the crowd and just becoming one with the rave or concert, whatever, or church, very enlivened church service, if you might lean that way. And so there is a place for our collective identity. I believe our individual identity, as of now in my experience in the world, is paramount, is important to bring individualism and uniqueness to each of us, because we all have different experiences, and we got to be treated as individuals, but we have to earn the our place as much as we receive from a collective identity and a group identity and our place as a protected group of civilians, you know, we are in reality surrounded by this, if you're in a first world country, a very complex and powerful military industrial, you know, complex. It's a precarious situation we're in, but we have to utilize the immense technological and you know, scientific and high culture that we're a part of. We've been born into. I'm always in the midst of, you know, I'm always continually trying to learn more about history nowadays, because I want to actually have a realistic understanding of where I am and what caused the current situation. How many noble deaths, how many amazing, great people, men and women, have had to, you know, suffer and have found meaning in knowing that their lives were a sacrifice, or they contributed significantly to the culture that we are now the recipients of. We can benefit so much. I think our lives can be infused with so much more meaning and purpose if we recognize and are grateful and have gratitude after learning about all the really horrific things that it took to really arrive at the place we're at. You know, for all the tragedies in life we currently are subject to, there's many things, many statistics that show we're in the absolute pinnacle of prosperity right now relative to our past, you know? Not relative to a fictional, idealistic future. Ultimately, the goal is to get there, to where we can actually critique something based on an ideal, but realistically, it's amazing what we've accomplished, what we've achieved. You know, we went from developing airplanes, the first manned flight in 1905, to walking the first human being on the moon in 1969. That's, you know, a period of, was it 50? Yeah, 69, of course. So, yeah, a period of 64 years. So a little over half a century. I think it was like something on the order of half a century from the time we invented manned flight to the time we sent someone in orbit around the Earth. And that's not to mention the advancements in computer processing. You know, we're calculating, we've developed computer chips that perform calculations not only in the trillions of bits per second, but also on the magnitude, the order of scale. Well, I think 10 nanometers is the most recent number I saw. That's on the scale of atoms. That's to the point where data, we have to start factoring in quantum tunneling and quantum mechanics into the actual computer chips now. We have to factor those in because the circuits, the physical medium, printed circuit boards, PCBs, the physical conduit along which the electrons travel is so small that they have the potential of jumping across through quantum dynamics. So, you know, over the last few hundred years in particular, science has advanced us to an incredible amount, an unbelievable level of privilege, you know, in a first world country especially, that, you know, I think a huge thing that a lot of people overlook when they're talking about the information age, the internet age we live in, is the responsibility it puts on us. We have it way easier than any of our ancestors ever had with modern medicine, technology, vaccinations is a huge one. God willing, we'll be able to develop something very, very rapidly. It's astounding the amount that we've progressed, and the rate at which we're progressing is itself increasing. So before we have the capacity to destroy the planet, we have to have an equivalent responsibility, and in order to feel a responsibility and feel great gratitude to our ancestors and a kinship to our current fellow humans, it helps so much recognizing the mutual chaotic turmoil of nature, of billions of years of evolution that we arose out of, and that these very intelligent ancestors, remember, they're your ancestors, were able to conjure up ideas of gods and morality to allow civilizations, entire civilizations, to prosper and coexist in larger and larger societies. It's pretty incredible, the thinking about the complexity of the human mind, and just how unmanageable it would be to sit and think about every little action if we didn't have a pre-existing moral code handed to us through our parents and their parents' parents, and this lineage of morality and how to behave in amongst families and larger groups is something that's developed over not just hundreds or even thousands, but tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. And really, in reality, millions and even billions, if you really consider the most base elements of interaction between two beings. And so we have a code, a hierarchy that exists, that is common, I think, to all human beings at the most instinctual level. We all know, and we all have a feeling and an understanding of what good is and what bad is, what evil is. Unnecessary suffering inflicted on an innocent individual is like the epitome of evil. And we all, many of us, of course, we recognize the existence of evil in the modern world. There's plenty of people with power that have no identity and have no connection with their history, and a sense of unity with a sense of gratitude to their ancestors for achieving what we've been able to achieve. And they have a pit of nihilism. They have a cowardice in the face of the unknown, which is why, so then they just squander their resources, and maybe in a completely innocuous way. Maybe they buy their own yacht, they buy their own islands, and they just have drunken orgies, and that's their, the innocuous version of that would be with of-age consenting other adults, and that's their idea of a life well lived. Well, we have an immense history of great individuals who have dedicated their lives to answering these questions of what the actual real best life is. And I love the phrase "to see infinity in a grain of sand" by William Blake. It sheds light on the infinitude of meaning you can find within each moment, within each interaction. And the more we learn about the incredible unlikelihood of our existence right now, based on all the intensely, horrific past our ancestors had to deal with and get through, and being able to bear children, to continue to bear children themselves down the lineages until our present existence is something we squander at our peril. And once you recognize the place of privilege, to me, I think it really, really gives a deep meaning to our lives. It gives a sense of urgency. It gives a sense of, again, responsibility to be the best people we can be. And it's crazy how, whether we want to just try to oversimplify a knowledge of dopamine, serotonin, chemical floods when we do something positive, I think it's way more complex than that. It's cool that we can trace neurochemical interactions and, develop antidepressants, I guess, accordingly. But it's, there's such a mysterious black box inside our own minds that we've yet to unlock, we've yet to really unravel, and let alone the connection between billions of these complex 3-pound organs that we're all walking around with. And Will Durant has very, very successfully he's portrayed the incredible effort and achievements of our past ancestors. In this book particularly, he's talking about the East and everything that Greece and Europe, I think he mentions, Europe and the United States in particular being the spoiled child and grandchild of the East, respectively. He just makes you bask in the amazing position that we find ourselves in. And he was writing this in the 30s, after World War I, before World War II. He had no reason, he had very little reason to be optimistic, but yet he's passionately, he's geniusly, just feverishly reading history and relaying it in his own way to the next generations. I'm reading it, listening to it. By the way, Audible, if you're listening, I'd love to be sponsored. It's meaningful. I used to be like really skeptical. I didn't understand why anyone would want to. I couldn't understand the concept of two deaths. We have one in our physical body, and the second, I forget where I read that, but when people forget, the last person forgets your memory, or last person to remember you themselves dies, their first death. And it's amazing. We have people like Hammurabi, Alexander the Great, Socrates, Plato, who have never died a second time yet. And I hope it stays that way, because we're all on this trajectory and we don't really know what it is, but we're all a part of it. Whether you're an insignificant part that's just a puppet of another more significant player, or you're someone who capitalizes on their time and privilege and opportunity to really test the limits of their mind and body while we have the ability to. It's up to us in a lot of ways, so it's encouraging. There's plenty to be realistically pessimistic about, but there's so much in our history and our past, in astronomy, the cosmos, and philosophy, and our inner minds that really points to work that needs to be done, unsolved mysteries and problems, and ones with hope, ones with a glimmer of possibility of whose solutions are on the horizon, just beyond it. So anyways, I'm a huge proponent of learning history in a pragmatic way, a way that helps us understand our current situation. I don't like just learning about every little nook and cranny of esoteric scholarship, that won't really add much more to the whole picture I have of humanity. But I do love learning about individual lives in particular, because those are the most elevating, most educational about our own lives in a serious philosophical way, a seriously skin in the game kind of way. So anyways, that's what I love about Will Durant's Our Oriental Heritage, and why I want to, I don't know what I'm going to call this episode yet, but why I seriously believe we would all benefit from a connection to our own, to history, but another way, a more personal way of putting that would be our own lineage, our own ancestry. So let's take a look at what Will Durant has to say after writing 1,000 pages on our Oriental heritage. Oh, and by the way, I want to say a huge thank you. I'm using my new phone stand to record the downward angle of books. Really cool. Who gave me that? I think it was Lindsay. Thanks, Lindsay. Really great card from Jewel in California, I believe. From MC or MGM. Someone in my backyard in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Gave me a really sweet card. It says, in this busy world, some special people have the art of taking time for others, of giving from the heart. And it says, Rich, thank you for simply being you, enjoying your channel, looking forward to many more. Thanks again, Mark. So anyways, Mark, that's big. It's very huge. It's flattering. It's really kind of you. It's showing, getting all that like support and comments. You're just, it reminds me, you know, like sometimes I forget, like I'm just here talking to my phone right now, yeah, recording into a microphone going into my computer. So it's really cool to remember that there's some people on the other end of this transmission, and in a big way it encourages me. It makes me feel connected to relate it to the episode at hand. So I appreciate that. You got Beach Ball Mania, John Lewis, Trevor, Lindsay. Yeah, you guys are always encouraging, and I love it. It's very, very uplifting. So thanks, guys. So this book here, I thought I was going to get to today. I ended up talking a lot longer. Surprise, surprise, than I thought I would. It goes from the 1500s, 1502 to 1969. It's a really, I don't know, it's just a very useful, very illustrated look. It's like a literal timeline of history. It's segregated into world events, literature, religion, philosophy, art and architecture, performing arts, science and technology, politics, in America, I guess, is a separate section. So I want to get to that at some point. Again, to get a really thorough understanding, just add to our understanding of where it is we actually lie in history. So here is Will Durant's little moldy cover. Maybe I can wash that at some point. I'd like to. Here's a map of Egypt. I wonder if zooming out, yeah, you'll lose a little bit of the clarity there, but at least we get the bigger picture. I love this fisheye lens on this thing. We have Egypt, which, of course, everybody knows about. We have the less known Mesopotamia, right here. And the Near East. A lot of things happen there. So let's flip to the end and see what Will Durant has to say about what he might have learned from our Oriental heritage. This last little section is called Envoy. Envoy? Is it a French word? One of you guys will correct me out there, no doubt. Let's get something to prop this up on. Alright, so here he is. Again, this is a man writing after years, maybe 10, 15 years of research into our Oriental heritage. And this is what he says at the very end of the book. We've passed in unwilling haste through 4,000 years of history and over the richest civilizations of the largest continent. It's impossible that we've understood these civilizations or done them justice, for how can one mind in one lifetime comprehend or praise the heritage of a race, the institutions, customs, arts, and morals of a people represent the natural selection of its countless trial and error experiments and the accumulated and unformulable wisdom of all its generations. And neither the intelligence of a philosopher nor intellect of a sophomore can suffice to compass them understandingly, much less to judge them with justice. Europe and America, here we go, are the spoiled child and grandchild of Asia, and have never quite realized the wealth of their pre-classical, meaning pre-Greek, antiquity, inheritance. But if now we sum up those arts in ways in which the West has derived from the East, or which, to our current and limited knowledge, appear first in the Orient at least, we shall find ourselves drawing up unconsciously an outline of civilization. The first element of civilization, and he breaks down here what he believes civilization is, meaning in the context of what arose, what he felt were the first signs of it from India and Asia, Japan, and all these characteristics which the West has benefited so much from. The first element is labor, tillage, industry, transport, and trade. In Egypt and Asia, we meet with the oldest known cultivation of the soil. He says in a footnote down here, it's possible that the agriculture and the domestication of animals are as ancient in the Neolithic Europe as Neolithic Asia, but it seems more likely that the New Stone Age cultures of Europe were younger than those of Africa or Asia. So in Egypt and Asia, we meet with the oldest cultivation of the soil, the oldest irrigation systems, the first production of those encouraging beverages, without which apparently modern civilization could hardly exist: beer, wine, and of course tea and coffee. The handicrafts and engineering were as highly developed in Egypt before Moses As in Europe before Voltaire in the 1700s, building with bricks has a history at least as old as Sargon of Akkad. The potter's wheel and the wagon wheel appear first in Elam, linen and glass in Egypt, silk and gunpowder in China. The horse rides out of Central Asia into Mesopotamia, Egypt, and then Europe. Phoenician vessels circumnavigate Africa before the age of Pericles, which was about 600 BC in Greece, the golden age of Athens. The compass comes from China and produces a commercial revolution in Europe. Sumeria shows us the first business contracts, the first credit system, the first use of gold and silver as standards of value. And China first accomplishes the miracle of having paper accepted in place of silver and gold, which is very huge. A lot easier to carry a bunch of slips of paper to the marketplace. The second element of civilization is government, the organization and protection of life in society through the clan and the family, law and the state. The village community appears in India, and the city-state in Sumeria and Assyria in the Middle East. Egypt takes a census, levies an income tax, and maintains internal peace through many centuries with a model minimum of force. And Gur and Hammurabi formulate great codes of law, and Darius organizes with imperial army and post, one of the best administered empires in the annals of government. The third element of civilization, the first two, labor, government. A third element of civilization is morality, the customs and manners, conscience and charity, a law built into the spirit, in generating at last that sense of right and wrong, that order and discipline of desire, without which a society disintegrates into individuals and falls forfeit to some incoherent state, or some coherent state. Courtesy came out of the ancient courts of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia. Even today, the Far East might teach manners and dignity to the brusque and impatient West. Monogamy appeared in Egypt and began a long struggle to prove itself and survive in competition with the inequitable but eugenic polygamy of Asia. Out of Egypt came the first cry for social justice. Out of Judea, the first plea for human brotherhood, the first formulation of the moral consciousness of mankind. Now, number 4. The fourth element of civilization is religion. The use of man's supernatural beliefs for the consolation of suffering, the elevation of character, and the strengthening of social instincts and order. From Sumeria, Babylonia, and Judea, the most cherished myths and traditions of Europe were derived. In the soil of the Orient grew the stories of the creation and the flood, the fall and redemption of man, and out of many mother goddesses came at last the fairest flower of all poesy, as Heine called Mary, the Mother of God. Out of Palestine came monotheism and the fairest songs of love and praise in literature, and the loneliest, lowliest, and most impressive figure in history. The fifth element in civilization is science. Clear seeing, exact recording, impartial testing, and the slow accumulation of knowledge, objective enough to generate prediction and control. Egypt develops arithmetic and geometry, establishes the calendar. Egyptian priests and physicians practice medicine. I'm sure we're praised as well. Explore diseases enigmatically? Like an enema? I think that's what that means. Perform 100 varieties of surgical operations and anticipate something of the Hippocratic Oath, the vow to do good for the patient. Babylonia studies, at least I think. Let me off the hook for that one. Babylonia studies the stars. It charts the zodiac, the 12 major constellations that we oscillate through over 24,000-year periods, and gives us our division of the month into 4 weeks, of the clock into 12 hours, of the hour into 60 minutes, and the minute into 60 seconds. India transmits through the Arabs her simple numerals in the magical decimals, and teaches Europe the subtleties of hypnotism and the technique of vaccination. The sixth element of civilization is philosophy. The attempt of man to capture something of that total perspective which in his modest intervals he knows that only infinity can possess. The brave and the hopeless inquiry into the first causes of things and their final significance. The consideration of truth and beauty, of virtue and justice, of ideal men and states. All this appears in the Orient a little sooner than in Europe. The Egyptians and the Babylonians ponder human nature and destiny. The Jews write immortal comments on life and death. While Europe tarries in barbarism, the Hindus play with logic and epistemology, the ways of knowing what we know, at least as early as Parmenides and Zeno of Elea. The Upanishads delve into metaphysics, a major book of Hinduism, Upanishads. And Buddha propounds a very modern psychology some centuries before Socrates is even born. And if India drowns philosophy and religion and fails to emancipate reason from hope, China resolutely secularizes her thought and produces, again before Socrates, a thinker whose sober wisdom needs hardly any change to be a guide to our contemporary lives, and an inspiration to those who would honorably govern states. The seventh element of civilization is letters. The transmission of language, the education of youth, the development of writing, the creation of poetry and drama, the stimulus of romance, and the written remembrance of things past. The oldest schools known to us are those of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Even the oldest schools of government are Egyptian. Out of Asia, apparently, came writing. Out of Egypt, the alphabet, paper and ink. Out of Egypt, the alphabet, paper, and ink. Out of China, print. The Babylonians seem to have compiled the oldest grammars and dictionaries and to have collected the first libraries. And it may well be that the universities of India even precede Plato's academy. The Assyrians in the Middle East, Mesopotamia, polished chronicles into history, and the Egyptians puffed up history into the epic. In the Far East gave to the modern world those delicate forms of poetry that the rest all their excellence on subtle insights phrased in a moment's imagery. Nabonidus in Ashurbanipal. Okay, I butchered that. Ashurbanipal. whose relics are exhumed by archaeologists were themselves archaeologists. And some of the fables that amuse our children go back to ancient India. And the eighth element of civilization is art, the embellishment of life with pleasing color, rhythm, and form. Its simplest sub-aspect, the adornment of buildings, the body, I guessed that one incorrectly. We find elegant clothing, exquisite jewelry, scandalous cosmetics in the early ages of Egyptian, Sumerian, and Indian civilization. Fine furniture, graceful pottery, and excellent carving in ivory and wood fill the Egyptian tombs. Surely the Greeks must have learned something of their skill in sculpture and architecture, in painting and bas-relief, not only from Asia and Crete, but from the masterpieces that in their day still gleamed in the mirror of the Nile. From Egypt and Mesopotamia, Greece took the models for her Doric and Ionic columns. From those same lands came to us not merely the column, but the arch, the vault, the clerestory, and the dome. And the ziggurat of the ancient Near East have had some share in the molding the architecture of America today. Chinese painting and Japanese prints changed the tone and current of the 19th century European art, specifically from Hokusai, Katsushika Hokusai. I remembered his first name now. In the Great Wave, that was a huge influence on the French Impressionists, I think. And Chinese porcelain raised a new perfection for Europe to emulate. The somber splendor of the Gregorian chant actually goes back age by age to the plaintive songs of exiled Jews gathering timidly in scattered synagogues. These are some of the elements of civilization and a part of the legacy of the East to the West. I love that. It really puts into perspective everything that, many of the things at least that we're in debt to the East for. So he ends, nevertheless, much was left for the classic world. Classic again meaning the ancient Greeks and Romans. Nevertheless, much was left for them, the Greeks, to add to this rich inheritance. Crete, for instance, would build civilization almost as ancient as Egypt's, and would serve as a bridge to bind the cultures of Asia, Africa, and Greece. Greece herself would transform, and by seeking not size but perfection, it would marry a feminine delicacy of form and finish to the masculine architecture and statuary of Egypt, and would provide the scene for the greatest age in the history of art. It would apply to all the realms of literature and creative exuberance of the free mind. It would contribute meandering epics, profound tragedies, hilarious comedies, and fascinating histories to the store of European letters. It would organize universities and establish for a brilliant interlude the secular independence of thought. It would develop beyond any precedent the mathematics and astronomy, the physics and medicine, bequeathed it by Egypt in the East. It would originate the sciences of life and the naturalistic view of humans. It would bring philosophy to consciousness and order, and would consider with unaided rationality all the problems of our life. It would emancipate the educated classes from ecclesiasticism and superstition. It would attempt a morality independent of supernatural aid. It would conceive of humans as citizens rather than as subjects. It would give us liberty, political liberties, civil rights, an unparalleled measure of mental and moral freedom. It would create democracy and invent the individual. And this was Greece, all what we think of as the crucible of our civilization. In America, we inherited it from Europe, inherited it themselves from Rome, and then Rome from Greece. Greece itself was highly influenced by the East. It was the crossroads. It was the trade Mecca, central. I guess Egypt, in a big sense, was the central location of all of Africa, Europe, and Asia. But Greece, on the Mediterranean, was such a nexus of the fluid exchange of culture. I think a lot more on the receiving end than the giving end from its early age of culture from the East. So Rome now would take over this abounding culture and spread it throughout the Mediterranean world and protect it for half a millennium from barbarian European assault, and then transmit it through Roman literature in the Latin languages to Northern Europe. It would lift woman to a power and splendor and a mental emancipation which perhaps she had never known before. It would give Europe a new calendar and teach it the principles of political organization and social security. It would establish the rights of the individual in an orderly system of laws that would help to hold the continent together through centuries of poverty, chaos, and superstition after the fall of the Roman Empire, the disintegration into small little isolated fiefdoms ruled by local, many times petty, king warlords. Very, very disconnected, unlike Rome. So information came, the exchange, the flow of information after the fall of Rome came to a extremely slow stagnation. Meanwhile, in the Near East and Egypt would blossom, the Near East and Egypt would blossom again under the stimulus of Greek and Roman trade and thought. Carthage would revive all the wealth and luxury of Sidon and Tyre, and the Talmud would accumulate in the hands of dispersed but loyal Jews. Science and philosophy would flourish at Alexandria in the lower Nile, and out of the mixture of European and Oriental cultures would come a religion destined in part to destroy, in part to preserve and augment the civilization of Greece and Rome. Everything was ready to produce the culminating epics of classical antiquity: Athens under Pericles, Rome under Augustus, and Jerusalem in the age of King Herod. The stage was set for the threefold drama of Plato, Caesar, and Christ. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe. Have fun. Remember to maybe show some gratitude for our ancient, our Oriental at times, inheritance. I luckily will be able to now start getting some more videos out. So if you choose to, let me remind you to hit that bell. If you guys stick around, I hope to see you soon. And I really love your comments. I thrive. I really enjoy them. It takes a while to get to sometimes, but let me know if you like this, and give me feedback. I love listening to what you guys have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope it wasn't too rambly. And thanks for watching.